Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church Online Worship. My name is Julia Jones. I'm the ministerial intern here at Beverly Unitarian, and I am so glad to welcome you to worship today. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation of children, youth, and adults of many races, many religions, many secular identities, genders, sexual orientations, abilities, educations, life experiences, and traditions. Here, we celebrate a diversity of beliefs, always striving to make space for more. All of you are sacred as your whole and authentic selves. You are welcome here. Whatever your past or your present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm 7 principles, which are not doctrine or dogma, but rather our shared values and moral guide. To learn more about these principles, please visit the website of our denomination at www.uua.org. We'd like to extend a special welcome to visitors and hope you'll stay for the virtual coffee hour after the service on Zoom, using the link that will be shared in the chat. We look forward to the day when we will be able to meet you in person. Although we currently remain distanced physically, we can stay connected. To get more involved, check out our Facebook page and our website. Contact the office to sign up for our monthly newsletter and weekly Friday email blast, and to be connected to Reverend David for pastoral care. Feel free to join us on the lawn at Beverly Unitarian at 1 p.m. on October 11th for some socially distanced charades. And now, let us join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. 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 Come, yet again come.
Unitarians, unlike Moses, do not simply find the fire burning in the wilderness. The flaming chalice is no burning bush, but something to be lit and relit by every person. It requires an act of will, of purpose, and of faith. This is how the UU congregation of Andover, Massachusetts describes our chalice. Our chalice is not divinely animated except through the work of people, of community, of our actions and choices as we grow, live, and create together, burning ever bright as a beacon of hope and freedom for those who choose to enter. Every time we light our chalice, we choose who we will be together and how we will interact with the community around us. May we always remember that the chalice flame is but a symbol of our service and our love in action in the world around us. Consciously chosen, intentionally illuminated, and burning, burning bright.
Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant, the commitment that we make to each other about what it is we're doing here, why we gather, who we're becoming, and who we are. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Once upon a time, there was an emperor, the ruler over a huge kingdom, who wanted a new and exquisite set of clothing. And so he brought in tailors, clothing makers, paid them sacks of gold to craft him the most amazing, most gorgeous, most stunning clothing that there was. When they brought it out to him, when they brought the clothes out to him, they didn't seem to have anything in their hands, but they acted as if they did. They said, "Look at these exquisite pieces of clothing. Look at the tailoring. Look at the stitching. Look at how the cloth is the most amazing thing we could find. Look at how utterly perfect this clothing is." They said it with such conviction, such certainty, such authority, that the emperor started to go along with it and say, "Yes, these are the most incredible clothing." And off he took. Off he took his pajamas and his nightgown, and there, standing in front of them with nothing on, he took the non-existent clothes out of their hand. He pulled them on. Remember, there's nothing there. He's putting on nothing. And as he pulled them on, as he pulled them up, the attendants around him, the people from his court, oohed and awed and complimented him on just how amazing he looked in these clothes. Out he went from the castle in a great parade down the main street of the city, showing everyone these incredible new garments that he was wearing. At first, people weren't sure what to think about this. They kind of gave him some weird looks, but then they saw that everyone from his court, all the officers and the nobles and everyone marching down the street in this parade, seemed so convinced and certain and sure of the amazingness of the emperor's clothes that they started clapping for him and shouting huzzas and hoorays and complimenting him. And not until the parade was almost all the way done, one kid, sitting on their parents' shoulders, point down to the emperor and say, "Hey, that guy's naked!" This is not a big reveal for you because you're already not wearing any clothes, Pilot. But this was a big deal for them. This was a really big deal for them because everyone started to laugh. Everyone started to point and shout and join in saying what the kid said. The emperor has no clothes. No clothes at all, Pilot. The emperor is naked. I know. He was pretending, and everyone went along with him. But no clothes. The thing about this story, and you've probably heard this story before, is that we usually like to think of ourselves as the kid, right? We usually like to think of ourselves as the one who's looking at the emperor with no clothes, saying, "Hey, everybody, wake up, people. This is not right." The reality is that we're not just that kid. Sometimes we are. Sometimes we're the people in the crowd, going along with it. We're the ones looking around and saying, "Look, I know that he doesn't have any clothes on, but everyone else seems so sure about this, I'm just going to go along with it," right? And sometimes we're the emperor. I mean, not literally, but sometimes we're the ones who let ourselves get fooled into thinking that we are a certain way, or we act a certain way, and the people around us nod and say, "Yes, you're like that," and the reality is that we're going out without any clothes on. Again, not literally, we hope. The story of the emperor having no clothes isn't just a story about a clever kid pointing out a foolish thing. It's also a reminder that we've got to face difficult truths about ourselves, too. That there will be times when we are the kid, there will be times when we are the emperor, and there will be times when we are the bystander. All of that's part of who we are. And all of that, Pilot, all of that means we got to pay attention. Right? Stay awake, stay alert. Are you awake and alert? Will you take a breath with me? And another, breathing deep, breathing down. I invite you into a time of prayer and meditation to breathe deep the breath of life, to be here now, to be present, to let yourself be held by your chair, your couch, wherever you are. Let yourself be supported in this moment. I offer you this prayer adapted from my colleague, the Reverend Jude Geiger, who begins, "Spirit of life, God of many names, source of hope, we come together at the end of another week, some worn down by struggles of health or home or work or working from home. May we be a community that makes space for the sharing of joys and sorrows, of anger and hope, and does that with grace and forbearance. In our nation's life, we pause this holiday weekend to remember the Native American lives lost from European colonization and the ongoing genocide against Indigenous Americans. We remember, too, the anti-LGBTQ violence that came with colonization and the harm it's caused and still does down through the centuries. Teach us to remember our history. Though we cannot make amends for what has come before, may we learn from those ways, never to repeat them in our lives today. May we develop new ways of relating to neighbor and stranger, without violence, without coercion, without deceit, without greed. Mother of Grace, help us to find a sense of humility where we have privilege, and strength where we face oppression. In our struggles, may we learn compassion, and in our power, may we learn temperance. as a community of faith, may we be a safe harbor in a world that's often harsh toward difference. Spirit of love, challenge us to use our presence as a healing force for justice and equality, knowing that although we have come far in the civil rights struggles of our times, there are many people still left behind. Basic rights are under threat again, and the work of building that beloved community is as pressing, as urgent, as difficult, and as beautifully joyful as it ever has been. Will you take a breath with me? Amen. This community sees each other's joys and sorrows. In our living through the week, these things build up in us. All those delights and joys, and all those bits of private grief that grind you down, and we come into community together to entrust these things into each other's care, to name them, to set them down into each other's hands. I'll light a first candle of gratitude for everyone who joined in the Unity March yesterday, for everyone who organized and planned it, for everyone who came together, who paused from their lives to speak with one clear voice and declare that Black Lives Matter in the 19th Ward. I invite you to add your joys and your sorrows in the chat, remembering that it's public, or to type "I" as if you were raising two fingers in silence for a candle to be lit.
To my loved ones and relations, with me in spirit every day, and to neighbors I have not yet met, close to home or far away. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. To my friends who make music, sharing joy both far and wide, and to those who we depend on, to teach, to heal, and to guide. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. To all who hear this message, to stranger and to friend, here's an embrace of music until we meet again. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, wash your hands, you mean the world to me. Be safe, stay at home, you mean the world to me.
Having good intentions as an individual doesn't mean you actually live them out all the time. Having good values as an organization doesn't automatically guarantee those values are made real. You remember Enron? Enron, this enormous company in the 1990s that turns incredible profits on paper because more or less they lied about all the money they were losing along the way. Enron's 4 core values, with capital V, values, were respect, integrity, communication, and excellence. So having good values as an organization, whether printed out for the investors or listed in an order of service, doesn't guarantee in any sense that we actually live them out. At General Assembly in 2017, that gathering of Unitarian Universalists from around the country, the UUA, the association's Board of Trustees, announced and chartered the Commission on Institutional Change. The charge given to that commission was to conduct an audit of the power structures, to analyze systemic racism and white supremacy culture within the Unitarian Universalist Association. In other words, the board said, we have this set of really beautiful values as an organization articulated in our 7 principles, but are we practicing what we're professing? How are we living up to, how are we failing to live up to our stated values around racial justice in this moment? These sort of commissions to investigate deeply some particular aspect of our denominational practice, these aren't new. Because of course our institutions, just exactly like us, won't live up to their best selves all the time, right? Without any attention, the status quo perpetuates itself. You don't get different results by doing the same thing. This is James Baldwin saying, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Well, the charge of the commission wasn't to investigate racists within our association, but to look at systemic racism, to ask whether our congregations and our association treat white folks as if they matter more than people of color. Systemic racism like that isn't about purposeful racist decisions. It's about the organizational culture that makes some people, some voices, some opinions, some practices worth more than others. The board said, in essence, we need to ask if the way we actually act in this tradition matches the values that we say that we have. We swim in the waters of a deeply racist culture. Whatever executive order might prevent me from saying that in government, I can say it plain to you right now. We swim in the waters of a deeply racist culture. A country that treats black and brown lives, people of color, as if they matter less than white lives. It stands to reason that that shows up in our congregations too. Why, then, in the face of real advancement and sincere effort within our tradition around issues of diversity and inclusion, why do we still experience crises and problems and situations where it's just not working? Well, that may seem like a real obvious question, but the commission spent 3 years in conversation with more than 1,100 people that called for testimony from individuals who told stories about how racism has affected their experiences as Unitarian Universalists. They convened focus groups at General Assembly, at regional and district meetings. They came to meetings of professional associations and online meetings, including a focus group of folks who voiced concern about their anti-oppression work. They hired consultants to review key organizational documents. They conducted multiple surveys at General Assembly. And they did data analysis on 650 pages of transcripts and 80 hours of interviews. And it is maybe a surprise or maybe not a surprise that they state from the outset the vast majority of people of color and others from identities marginalized within Unitarian Universalism had experienced discriminatory and oppressive incidents, cultures within Unitarian Universalist circles. Religious professionals, they write, felt these aggressions and attacks on dignity most frequently and most strongly. And those who were white had a spectrum of experiences ranging from denial that any kind of racism existed within Unitarian Universalism. Quote, "We have a 0% occurrence," said one respondent, to those who saw clear issues with equity, inclusion, and diversity, and paid a large cost professionally and socially to name them. The vast majority, they said, though, the vast majority of us were people in the middle, vaguely aware, somewhat committed, feeling unskilled. Even so, the commission found that many Black and Indigenous and people of color chose not to participate because of prior experience with information gathering that led to little change, as well as the barriers posed by the large number of people, employed and lay, whose experiences have already led them to leave our association. They write, "We quickly learned that people were reluctant to share their stories. One reason was that religious professionals feared losing their jobs or their abilities to perform their jobs, as did those who identified as white allies. Another reason was that people of color, whether professional or lay, felt that they had told their stories again and again, reliving pain and traumatic experiences to no end. Over and over, they write, we heard from people who said they were no longer willing to describe the pain they experienced because after the initial shock and reaction took place, little changed. Some described this as a form of trauma porn in which those in the majority culture get a voyeuristic look into the lives of Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, and experience deep emotions and failed to act in any systemic way. Altogether, the Commission published 117 recommendations based on an analysis of theology, governance, congregations and community, hospitality and inclusion, what it means to live our values in the world. They analyze religious professionals, education for liberation, innovation and risk-taking, restoration and reparations and accountability. It's a lot. One consultant suggested, though, look, our experience is that if an organization or an institution wants to learn a few concepts, wants to become aware of some things that had previously been unaware of, then a training or two may suffice. But the Unitarian Universalist Association is already on a path to improve the racial and cultural climate in the organization as a whole, with a hope to impact congregations everywhere. Such a goal requires a consistent effort over time to impact at all the individual and interpersonal levels, as well as the institutional policies, practices, cultural environment, building of community levels. In other words, why so much focus on anti-racism in our association, especially these last years? Why so much communication? Why so many articles? Why so many sermons? Because the way to genuine change requires transformation. It requires a different way of being. It is not as simple as a sermon or a seminar. It's work in every aspect of congregational life and our own lives. So all these concrete recommendations, these 117, come in part because long experience suggests we would much rather think about these things than act on them. Like the old, I heard this as a University of Chicago joke, never mind how it works in practice, tell me how it works in theory. The Commission's charge is for us to do the work of practice, of becoming. Reading these recommendations, it's a lot all at once. It's so much. And I felt going through these, that flight or fight response. There's so much. It's paralyzing almost. But the work isn't to do everything all at once. The work of transformation is to go steadily onwards. The poet Philip Booth says, how you get there is where you arrive. How you get there is where you arrive. And the Commission writes, the work of becoming more equitable, inclusive, diverse within our congregations is justice work. If we can't do that well in our own houses, in our own congregations, we can't be effective as justice partners. And I read that with so much emphasis on the work of becoming. It's easy to hear them calling to do our work in our own congregation. It's easy to misunderstand them saying, we can't be effective at just justice partners in the public square until we have finished becoming wholly equitable, fully inclusive, entirely diverse at home. But that is not the point. What makes us partners outside these doors is the becoming, is our commitment to the work, is our commitment to transformation, is our commitment to listen, to learn, to be changed, to talk across the usual borders and barriers of our lives and our pews, to change, to grow. That commitment is a becoming. How we get there is where we arrive. The UUA will create for themselves a 5-year roadmap based on the report, but later this month they publish a congregational action study guide on the report, and I'm excited to read it with you. I want to invite you into a conversation around this, that later in the fall or through the winter, we can get together and read together and talk together about what it suggests. Our mission is to grow our spirits and help heal the world in community. And that's not an endpoint. There's not a threshold where you've grown enough. No one retires from growth in the spiritual path, and no one's too young to start. That work of seeking to understand before seeking to be understood, it's old advice, and advice almost totally ignored in online argument, but seeking to understand, this is an urgent task. The Commission writes, their research reveals today, meaning we in our congregations, can barely speak to each other across generations and socioeconomic location. Terms such as white supremacy culture have dramatically different meanings across generations. They say in today's world, it's easy to stay in our comfort zones with communities and communication channels designed to reinforce our opinions so that we have less and less common language among us. We must enter in some negotiation to understand that while we may not use the same words to describe the issues, we must have a shared commitment to the work of building a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive faith. When asked where the Universalists stand on some social question or another, an old Universalist minister said, "We don't stand, we move." That's our invitation too. That's the invitation of this report. That's the invitation of every one of the recommendations it offers, to move forward, building our relationships with each other, paying attention to the way we engage with each other. I'm grateful to be on this journey with each of you and with all of you. Amen.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
The commission ends its report after all these pages and all these recommendations with the beautiful simplicity. They say ultimately what we have been talking about for these years are basic commitments that grow out of our theological legacy. Retailored for our time, these are the commitments. Hospitality, the willingness to welcome all who would find solace, comfort, and inspiration in the values that we hold. We're committed to this. Common sense, the idea that we can often just do things in a more simple and basic way that makes sense, rather than making them unnecessarily convoluted. Empathy is our commitment, the ability to perceive and care about another's sore struggle, even if it's not your own, recognizing that it is part of ours, and that we're bound together through the interdependence that's part of our faith. Compassion, the ability to walk with another, to be caring toward one as if they were yourself. Self-awareness and mindfulness. We're committed to recognizing the power we have over one another, simply allowing ourselves to wake up to that, not to be shamed or made guilty, rather to simply allow ourselves to prepare our own hearts for transformation. Continuity. We affirm a recognition that we would not be having these conversations about race in 2020 within our association if we had kept them going in the 1970s, or in the 1980s, or in the 1990s. For commitment and continuance are what will allow real progress. Restoration. Understanding that where harm has been done, effort must be expended to provide address and redress. Prioritization is our commitment in this work. Many of the recommendations of the committee are about focus and emphasis rather than money. And though investments are needed in specific areas, much can be accomplished through education, through attention. That takes work. It takes the work of prioritizing. And finally, they say, we affirm this basic commitment to humility, knowing we don't know all the answers, especially in these times, offering to one another those glimpses of what we do know to together create a clearer sense of where we're going. In the spirit of that humility, they say, no doubt we've forgotten some ideas and recommendations. But with this, we pass the baton for others to pick up and to carry. This, they say, each of these hospitality and common sense, empathy and compassion, self-awareness and mindfulness, continuity, restoration, prioritization, and humility. These are the fundamental values we need to conserve, to lift up, to recommit ourselves to in this work of a people becoming. Our worship is ended, and our service begins again. Go in peace, and amen.